Good morning and welcome back to Tactics Board. Today I'm previewing Norwich City's game against Leicester City at Carrow Road, and this feels like the real acid test against the Championship's clear promotion favourites, clear title favourites I'd say, and a team that looks like they've just about hit their stride as they prepare to come to Carrow Road. They obviously beat Russell Martin's Southampton 4-1 away from home in their last fixture, which doesn't feel especially good for Norwich, especially considering they drew 4-4 with the Saints earlier in this season. Of course, the way that the South Coast club sort of went after the game did make it a little bit easier for Leicester to counter-attack with their attacking players and with the pace that they've got in behind, but they just absolutely dominated that game, to be honest, and I think any Norwich fan that saw that won't be feeling amazing about the fixture this week. But Norwich have also impressed themselves. They're obviously towards the upper echelons of the Championship, and they're coming off quite a hard-earned 1-0 win over Stoke, who, although they're struggling looking at their points tally and their position in the table, do have a lot of good players and did present quite a stern test at Carrow Road. So it's going to be a very interesting one. I think it could be quite an entertaining one, and I'm going to get into how I see it playing out in today's video. I'm also going to give you my predicted 11, but we're not going to spend too long on that for obvious reasons. But yeah, here it is, and I think once you've seen it, you'll understand why I'm not so keen to spend too long on it. So I've gone with Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson at centre back, Dimitris Yannoulis at left back, Kenny McLean and Gabriel Sara in central midfield, Christian Fasnacht on the right, Jonathan Rowe on the left, Ashley Barnes behind Adam Eder up front. And the reason I don't want to spend too long on that is because it's unchanged from Norwich's last two games. Of course, they did get that win over Stoke, and I don't see Wagner changing too much. It probably will be quite a different game, at least from the start, to what we saw. But with the momentum that team is building and with the aspects that they've shown, I think it's going to be difficult to drop any of them. Really, maybe there's still a conversation to be had around Adam Eder, but just as the situation was with Hwang going into that Stoke game, he still won't have had much time to train with his new teammates. Probably needs a little bit more time to get Wagner's style sort of into his brain and get on board with that a little bit as well. So I think it would be difficult to shove him in at the deep end there. He does probably have a little bit more mobility about him and a little bit more movement, and I'm going to discuss later how I think Norwich could look to counter-attack in this scenario. So perhaps he will have a role to play, and it could be a game that suits him a little bit. But I would be surprised if we see him start. I think it will be the same 11, especially given how they performed in the first half against the Potters. Although I do expect it to be a completely different game because Leicester really want possession. Obviously, they've got Enzo Maresca as their coach, who worked under Pep Guardiola, and there are definitely some signs of that Manchester City team and of Guardiola's philosophy in this Leicester team. Of course, the quality isn't really at the same level, but for the Championship, they look like they could absolutely dominate it with that style of play. They want to pass the ball quickly, they want to be camped in the opposition half, and when they lose it, they go after it really, really quickly. And although that is the sort of situation that probably keeps fans on the edge of their seats, I don't think it's going to be an especially enjoyable one from a nerves point of view for Norwich fans tomorrow night. But I think it does play into Norwich's hands because we've seen how effective they can be when they counter. And I think Norwich, to be fair to them this season, have been more of a possession-based side and more of a conventionally attacking side than we were expecting to see from pre-season. There were a lot of clean sheets, no real high-scoring games against top-level opposition, and a lot of sitting behind the ball and waiting to pounce. I think we expected to see more of that than we have so far this season, but Norwich have tended to dominate games, especially at Carrow Road. But just with how good Leicester are at doing that, I think trying to play them at their own game would be a foolish move, and I don't think that's what Wagner is going to try and do. I think he'll look at it as an opportunity to use those strengths that he's seen in his team athletically. If you look at the Norwich team on the pitch now, compared to what it was a couple of years ago, and we did hear a lot about physicality and how they wanted to improve that, and athleticism was a very key word after that first relegation with Stuart Webber at the helm as well. And I think if you look at that team now, they've finally built a team that sort of addresses that. They've got Shane Duffy at the back, Ben Gibson, both good aerially and from set pieces. Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean are both athletes themselves. Even Christian Fasnacht on the right is very tall for a winger and quite what's a diplomatic way of putting this? he's quite gangly. I'm not sure if that's much better than anything else I could have come up with, but that's the sort of player that he is. And you've obviously got Adam Eder and Ashley Barnes expected to start up front, with Josh Sargent one of the first choices when he's available as well. So Norwich do have a team that they'll feel can counter and can provide that athleticism in that sort of situation. And I think Leicester's setup could play into their hands in that way. Of course, it's not as simple as saying the tactics play into their hands, so it'll be easy for Norwich to play against. As we saw with Daniel Farke's team at Carrow Road a number of times a couple of years ago, if you play that possession style well enough, there aren't going to be many teams, especially with Leicester's squad, that are going to be able to counter it. So I think even a loss for Norwich in this game would be understandable and wouldn't be much of a significant blow. I don't think, unless they go and lose 5 or 6-0, that many Norwich fans would be coming away from Carrow Road worried about Norwich's season or their promotion hopes based purely on a loss to Leicester. But there will certainly be areas they're looking at exploiting, and I think the pressing from Leicester also works into Norwich's hands. Yes, they'll have to be switched on and concentrated, and they'll have to minimise mistakes, but what they want is for teams to come and press them so that they can then play through that very quickly, and that's where the physicality helps them. Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean are both good at rolling defenders and getting out of those situations, whereas before Norwich did want to pass out, but they had the likes of Tom Tribal in midfield and Mario Vrancic, so they had to do it technically and with movement, whereas I think Norwich have more players to now actually physically break the lines and do that in a quicker way. So I think if they can do that, they will have to be at the top of their game, because this is probably the most difficult game, or up there in the most difficult games they'll face this season. But if they can do that, then they probably do give themselves a chance, because Leicester's defence hasn't looked especially strong at times this season. They do look vulnerable, and I think if you've got the likes of John Rowe running at those defenders, you've got Christian Fasnacht and Jack Stacey's link up on the right, and you've got Ashley Barnes and Adam Eder, who probably haven't quite clicked yet as a duo, but can both offer things in attack at this level. If you've got all of those things going at a defence that can be quite vulnerable, I think Norwich can give themselves a chance. Of course, quieting Stefan Mavididi, if I've said that correctly, is going to be very key. He was absolutely excellent in that Southampton game. Of course, somebody Norwich were linked with this summer. Don't believe there was too much in that, but he's somebody who you can see why they've brought him in, and he looks like he could really rip up the Championship this season. In fact, he's already started. So that individual battle, he'll probably come up against Jack Stacey a decent amount, will be an interesting one. I think Stacey, to be honest, attack-wise has been very good, but defensively has had a few games where he could have improved. Not every game, but I have seen over the last few weeks especially some times where he's looked slightly exposed. I think Yanulis on the other side, if Leicester engineer their wingers that way, could struggle. He struggled a little bit against Tyrese Campbell for Stoke, and they needed to bring on Przemysław Wacheta to sort of counter that and to take some pressure off Yanulis, who had collected a booking as well. I think Leicester could get at Norwich on the wings, but that's not really their preference. So the good news for Norwich in terms of setup that way is that they probably will be focused on trying to pass the ball through central areas, and they've got a lot of players that Norwich have got a lot of players that help them counteract that. Even Christian Fasnacht coming up off the right, when he comes back to defend, he likes to do that through the middle of the pitch, and he helped out with that against Stoke very much. So I think there are a few things that could play into Norwich's hands a little bit at Carrow Road. What won't play into their hands, of course, is the quality of opposition, and there are a lot of players to watch out for there. When I was watching that Southampton game, just the sight of Wilfred Ndidi at Championship level chipping the ball over a goalkeeper made me realise quite how strong this Leicester squad is, and how difficult this task will be for Norwich. So there's a lot for them to deal with, but after the start they've made to the season, they will feel positive and they will feel like they're capable of doing that. Let's hope that they can get another 3 points. I think probably most of you watching would take one against the favourites for the Championship title, but let's see what they can produce. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you again soon on Tactics Board. Of course, we'll have a lot of other preview stuff. David Wagner's press conference from yesterday should be up now, with plenty of updates on injury and his thoughts going into the game. And then after the game, we'll have, of course, fan reaction, Connor's verdict, and all the stuff over on the Pinken Plus app. So go over to pinken.com/subscribe to take advantage of an introductory offer there. And I'll see you on Tactics Board very soon.